Yep, thanks, Cahir. And just welcome to our witnesses here before us this morning. I just want to follow on from some of the questions there in relation to the National Children's Science Centre, which I think certainly in my view has been a scandal in many regards. We look at the Metrolink, we look at the National Children's Hospital, and I think this has to be up there with it. 26 years later, millions spent and absolutely nothing but arbitration, legal expenses and serious question marks still hanging around the viability, the business plan, the business case around this whole project, how it came about, whose concept it was in the first idea, and whether the OPD, OPW, wherever actually consulted are part of the entire process. I just want to touch on the business case, and it has been said here, I think Mr. Conlon said that no business case has been presented to the OPW to date, and that you're hopeful you may see something in the next while. Is that?
Like those words, Deputy, like the OPW role in this will be as the people who have designed it, we've done that, as people who will do the procurement and people who will actually oversee the building of it. In relation to the business itself, that's not for us to make an assessment as to whether it's a viable entity or not. That's for the department who will end up funding this. As you know, from the OPW votes perspective, we don't directly fund this type of development. It will be funded through whatever department is going to be responsible for it. We fund flooding, we fund our own office accommodation, we fund our own heritage sites, but not this type of development. So I won't be assessing a business case for this.
You made reference earlier on to maybe getting sight of a business case.
I said my understanding was a business case would be presented.
Okay, a business case will be presented. Okay, you also said that so far about 1.5 million exposure to the OPW to date is.
That's what we would have spent on various design and other costs over the last number of years. Kieran O'Connor, my colleague, might give detail on that if you require, Deputy.
Just does that include also legal expenditure as well? Maybe you might just touch on that, Mr. O'Connor.
In terms of the arbitration, if I can come in there, that's not finalised yet, so that bill hasn't arrived yet.
Okay, so that's okay.
So the 1.5, Deputy, would relate to planning applications. So, you know, you pay so much cost per square metre, and then for surveys and all of that. So a lot of that work would be of use because we surveyed the wing of the campus up there in the concert hall area, which had to be done anyway because it was a building of an age. And when the UCD pulled out in 2007, those buildings were sort of not in the best shape, and so they need to be fixed. So the survey work will be of benefit no matter what happens, and will, as I said earlier, 58% of the funding for the project will go into the historic building.
Okay, and just the exposure then from the arbitration, have we an idea how much has been set aside for covered legal costs?
I don't have figures on that, Deputy, at this stage. We can get back to the Commission about it. I don't have any indication what those costs will be yet.
You have no indication?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
It will be extremely costly. There's no provision put aside to cover any legal costs?
We don't. We will meet them from our ongoing resources, but I have no indication of what those costs will be yet, Deputy. The process is not finalised.
Okay, so 1.5 million plus legal costs before a sod is being turned here. Now, it has been suggested, and certainly information that I have to hand, that the ICML, who are obviously centrally involved in this, they have accessed considerable state funding to get to this point as well from numerous different departments and grants, etc. The information I have is that to this point they've received in and around €5 million through different departments, and this isn't a question for you, but certainly it is a cause of concern. So we probably, over 7 million drawn down, spent on this project without a sod being turned, which I think there's certainly further questions for other departments and how funding was drawn down and via what funding stream as well. So certainly that is something that needs to be followed up separately. Can I just ask, in relation to whether this project will be or has been subject to a business case appraisal in accordance to the requirements of the Public Spending Code? Has that been carried out, or are you saying that's for someone else? It's not for the OPW?
We are the builder on this case,
Okay.
and that would be our obligation. In terms of the business case requirements, as I indicated, they will be for the funding department in due course.
Okay.
That's helpful, Deputy. We have Ms. Ciara Morgan from the Department of Public Expenditure here.
Yep. I might ask
Ms.
that
Morgan
question.
will
Yeah.
recommend
Yeah.
her on this.
No, we haven't seen a business case, Deputy.
Okay. No business case whatsoever.
That's correct.
And probably 7 million expenditure. That's extraordinary in anyone's estimation. Can I just go to site identification, the whole process around that, and the public consultation piece or lack of in terms of identifying the site. So can I ask how the site was identified in the first instance? What involvement the OPW had in that process?
You mean the site of the National Concert Hall?
Yep.
Can I ask my colleague to deal with that, Deputy, if you don't mind?
Yeah, when the scheme had been put forward by government in 2007 rather, that was Military Road, and subsequently that was used for the Garda building that was completed about 2 years ago. As part of the agreement in 2013, the conclusion of that arbitration was to move the site to the present location on the northern wing of the campus at the concert hall. And everything then flows on from there, because that's a different site, it's a different building, and as I said, the historic building will account for 58% of what's involved, and the other bits will be new elements that can be used by anyone, really. It's almost like an empty vessel. It can be filled by whoever uses it for whatever purposes. And so that's part of the overall complex of redevelopment of the concert hall. The concert hall then would account for the rest of the campus up in Earlsford Terrace.
Okay. And public consultation around that process to go to the...
Well, it went through normal planning and element. There was a group who felt that, who walked their dogs in the Ivy Gardens, who felt that nothing should happen to it and it should be kept exactly as it was.
Because it's a public space and for it to be handed over to a private entity?
No, but the private entity element, that was something OPW inherited from government. We had no involvement in that selection of that group.
Okay.
The building will remain state ownership, Deputy.
Okay. Can I ask around the whole arbitration process, the terms of reference for the two separate arbitration process? Can the terms of reference be made available to this committee?
By terms of reference, Deputy, you mean?
The legal advice around the arbitration process.
Well, that happened in two steps, the 2013 one and then the more recent, yeah.
Can that be made available?
I'm sure they can. I mean, we have legal
Just in terms
advice.
of the legal advice, Deputy, we just might need to take our own advice on that as to whether we can or cannot make it available, but we can revert you on that.
Revert to us on that. Why were there two separate arbitration processes?
Well, the first one in 2012 was got to do because the financial crash had occurred and OPW hadn't proceeded with the project. So that group wanted to ensure that it would happen and took the arbitration case, which ended up that OPW had to give further commitment to do it.
Okay. And those arbitration processes now are fully exhausted? Fully.
Quite. I think we are going through the planning commissions. The next stage and the final stage of arbitration will be for the arbitration to reconvene the parties. which hasn't happened yet.
Okay, and are the findings of those processes, the conclusion of the process when it is, are they binding? Have they locked the OPW into going ahead now with this, or what?
They are, Deputy. They have actually the power of a High Court order, effectively.
Power of a High Court order?
So a person could bring us to the High Court and say they haven't executed in force, and there'd be no defence against that.
Okay. And what, I suppose, what are the consequences of not honouring that? I mean, has that been looked at, the exposure there of not honouring the arbitration?
I think, Deputy, we need to be careful here. Like, the state does honour its legal obligations, and I think that's something that.
Well, at this stage, I'm not asking you not. I mean, it's subject to the High Court, but I'm sure that has been looked at. What exposure to the state is there if we don't, if the state doesn't honour?
What would happen normally? You get an further enforcement order signed by the President of the High Court. That's the next step that would happen.
It's effectively a specific performance.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just, I know you said the final bill is not in for the legal cases, the arbitration. There's two separate arbitrations there. Have we any costs in at this stage from that process?
We would have it from 2013. I can't recall what that was now. It's a long time ago. But we could get that figure for you.
Yeah,
The one that's now happened, what happens is the arbitrator now knows that the planning has been granted, and he decides when to call the groups together, and then he issues his final direction. And what that would mean in this case is you now have a planning permission, you must execute, and he'll probably ask us for a timescale for execution.
Okay. Well, I'll try come back in, but I think this entire process that has left the Irish state, at serious exposure, it lacks transparency. It lacks due process. I think it's been driven by some connected people without any proper process or procedure, and there's a lot of questions for a lot of departments in terms of funding streams being made available when other science projects have been essentially left to rot on the vine, not given access to any state funding, and being told there's no specific funding headings there for it, and yet money was made available to the tune of in excess of 5 million from different departments for this. I think, it's
Just in relation to the question